Hi, I'm Shiv.
And I'm Chitra.
We are the co hosts of this show, Software People Stories.
We're happy to bring you stories of people associated with software as makers or consumers.
In every episode, we talk to people on their own personal and professional journeys.
Their interests and approach to work and life in a free flowing conversational format. We hope that you will be able to draw your inspiration from their experiences and insights.
These podcasts are made possible by PM Power Consulting, who have helped individuals, teams, and organizations on their delivery excellence journeys.
In my free flowing conversation with Neeraja Ganesh, we talk about how she started her IT career in a rather unusual manner, how she learned from any situation that came her way, from various kind of jobs to constantly finding learning opportunities, being thrown into the deep end of a situation and finding her voice, to mentoring and grooming people at work, and finally, finding her passion in helping women get back to work after a break. Listen on. So thank you, Neeraja. Thanks for agreeing to be a podcast guest on our show. It's wonderful to be talking to you today. So as is usual with all our podcast guests, we invite you to give us an introduction about yourself.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you for thinking of me as one of the guests that could come on the series of podcasts that you've done so far. As I said, I was just listening in to all of them, and I feel privileged to be part of that series. Let me do a quick professional intro first. So I've had 25 years of experience in the IT industry, the information technology industry, and in 25 years, I worked in 4 companies, and my major stint was with ANZ, which is what I call as a transformational phase for me. The other 2 companies before that were smaller stints, 2 years, 2 years. At ANZ, I spent 16 years, which is where I grew from being a programmer to a team lead and really scaled up my career into, a higher leadership ranks. A lot of learning. Definitely, I attributed to ANZ. After which, I also worked in a services company for 5 years, and then finally decided to call it quits from the corporate life in September 2017. I was hoping to do some freelancing consulting work because I didn't necessarily want to get back into a corporate career. So I was exploring and talking to people. I did start a small consulting assignment, but before I knew, I was approached to head the not-for-profit foundation, which is called the JobsForHer Foundation, which is what I do now. And how that happened was while I was in my last role in the corporate career, I realized that there's a lot that needs to be done for women. As such, I'm quite passionate about, growing people in their careers and a special interest when it comes to women. And I was driving a lot of diversity and inclusion initiatives in my last company. So I got associated with Jobs for Her, which is a portal that helps women on a career break restart their careers. And of course, this year we have expanded beyond women on a career break to actually look at late starters as well as women who want to rise in their careers. So I was associated with them as a mentor on that portal, and I would volunteer in for anything that they would need help for. And hence, I was approached to head the not-for-profit foundation when they started it, and that's where I am now in my professional journey. Personally, I'm married and I have a 17-year-old girl who I won't say she keeps me busy. She keeps herself very, very busy. And so I don't have really, need to think about what I need to do with her and her free time. Yes, that's a brief and quick intro about myself.
Wonderful, Neeraja. I think it's going to be a really fascinating conversation and very, very interesting. How did you choose to get into IT or software development? Where did this whole journey begin?
Okay, so I said 25 years, right? So which meant that I was finishing up college in the 1990s. And I come from a very conservative family. There was no talk of a job or a career, in this setup. I'm an only child, and the obvious thing that was spoken about all through my growing up years was that, yeah, you finish your graduation and we'll get you married, and kind of life is set. So I had no in thinking that I would get into a job. But I finished my graduation, and of course, in those days, they were looking out for a groom for me, and there was time available, and I told my dad that I would like to do this IT course because it's the buzzword, and apparently you get high paying jobs if you did this course. Not knowing whether I'm ever going to work, but it was an interest. I did aspire, I think, a little. I thought, okay, before I get married, maybe I should make a little bit of money, and this course will get me into that. And my father obliged. She said, okay, go ahead. So I enrolled for this 2-year course from an IIT, which was called the Advanced Diploma in Systems Management. So it was across 4 semesters, each semester for 6 months. And as I was in my 3rd semester, Sonata came in. They were looking for some contract staff, and they picked us up, and that's how my journey into the IT world started.
What happened then? What happened afterwards? What are some of the lessons that you learned along the way as you were a software developer?
Okay, so my first job at Sonata, which was a 3-month contract assignment, was a project which was a conversion project, converting PL1 code to COBOL. So this was for a client who had this huge mainframe system, and all the code was written in PL1. And of course, COBOL is also, even then, it was called an ancient dying language, but I think PL1 was even more ancient. So we were doing this conversion. It was a very mundane job. There was not much of brain power that needed to be used, because they had what they called as an accepted conversion methodology document. So they had written that this is the syntax in PL1, then you convert it like this into COBOL. So they had done a research, and that kind of created this huge ACM, accepted conversion methodology document. And we was about 12 or 13 of us who were picked up from an IIT, and we got into this project. We just had to blindly do it. And then there would be a code review, because we couldn't even test it, huge system. So each of us were given small programs. So there's no way you could test anything till somebody put it together and do a systems testing, which probably some other team was doing. So we had to just be very, very careful about understanding the syntax, converting it blindly to COBOL, and then doing a code review to ensure that we followed this, conversion methodology, and handing it over for a peer review. Very mundane, and you could also call it boring. This is not what somebody who is looking to do in an IT world would do. But I think all of us who picked up this role, for us, Sonata was a dream company, definitely. We got this job, even though it was 3 months contract assignment, even before we completed our course, and we were paid for the first 3 months 1,500 rupees, which was like big money in those times. My father was really, he fell off his chair. He said, what? You're not even completing the course and you get this kind of salary. And what helped that was, after 3 months, they extended the contract for another 3 months, and they made our internship stipend, or whatever you call it, as 2,500. So it was like, okay, let's stick at it, whether it is boring, whether you're using your brain or not, there's money coming in. But I think obviously over a period of time, then the contract assignment finished, and we all got into permanent roles in the company. To me, if I reflect upon it, there are 2 things that my learnings are. One, from the fact that these days, and I'm generalizing, I think kids are like very, very, though they're very focused and clear about this is exactly what I want to do, and if they don't get that, they probably are not going to try out anything else. I think what worked for all of us who started in that era in this way was, let's learn from whatever comes to us. I think that is the basic foundation because of which we've been able to grow and sustain ourselves in the IT industry for such a long period of time. Everything has a learning, whether it be boring, whether it's not the cutting edge technology or whatever. There is a learning which definitely is going to help you at some point in time, both personally and professionally. That was one. The other learning, when I reflect again now, is learn to ask. So I was, as I said, we all got in when we were still studying. I had taken up a 4-semester course. The rest of the people who got into Sonata at that point in time were finishing it off with 3 semesters. So they kind of finished their course and they could continue to work. But for me, I had 1 more semester to do. And this project in Sonata was working in shifts. So there was a morning shift from 7 to 3, and I think the afternoon shift was from 3 to 11. And my 4th semester classes were from 3 to 5. So for both reasons, because I had a class at 3, also because I was a girl and they wouldn't possibly put me in the night shift, they gave me the 7 to 3 slot. And my classes used to be only for 3 days a week. So we all thought it would work out. On those 3 days, I would leave half an hour early, go to institute, and then the other 3 days somehow I make it work. But the other thing is that in those days we didn't have computers at home. So though the classes were only for 3 days and 2 hours per day, we had to spend a lot of time in the institute trying to find spare computers to do our project work and things like that, which meant I had to just hang around in the institute waiting for some computer to get free. So even the morning shift was not working for me. And what I did was I came back and I told the 2 key people in the project that this is the situation. Shifts don't work for me. Now, if I were to think of such a conversation in any organization today, I think majority of them would respond to say that, okay, I think you can go finish your 4th semester and then come back and let's see if there's an opportunity. But what happened there was these 2 people, they said, okay, we'll make an exception for you. We will give you a dedicated computer in the office, which means that you can come in anytime. You can go anytime because we understand you have to be at the institute for whatever number of hours. As long as you complete and deliver the week's, deliverables as per the quality standards that we have. And that was an exception made for me. Nothing else was, exception. They didn't say do less number of programs, or they didn't say it's okay if you make so many mistakes. Everything else was the same as for the rest of the members, but just that, okay, I could come in anytime between 7 and 11. And that is what helped me. I mean, I continued, in the team as the rest of my institute members, and after 9 months, I got permanent employment in Sonata, just like the rest of the group got. So that is another learning. I think we must ask. Many of, especially the girls and women, hesitate. They think too much. Okay, what will happen? And I say, what's the worst that can happen? Maybe they'll just decline. It's okay. At least you ask and you see what you get out of it.
I think that's a wonderful example of, the organization being supportive. And I think more importantly, you stepping up to ask. What I saw is, a situation presented itself and you just responded by asking, and lo and behold, there was something that you could work through.
Absolutely.
Get to where you wanted to. What happened after Sonata? What was your life like at ANZ? Because you spent 16 years over there.
Sure. So Sonata, after 2 years, I moved on to a company which is now known as Manhattan Associates. Again, I think I joined there as a COBOL programmer, but that they were into AS400, so they trained us on AS400 and RPG programming. So I kind of, was again a programmer for those 2 years that I stayed with Manhattan Associates. Small company, they had a product, and we kind of were very focused on delivering to those product requirements. It was catering only to the US market at that point in time. An interesting phase because I got to learn a new language on a different platform. And work with a smaller team, so you kind of understand the dynamics. You're directly working with the MD, so there were, I think, in today's terms, co-founders, right? So there were 4 co-founders, and you're directly working with them. They would sit with you and look at your code and all of that. So that's a different experience altogether. I moved out of that company because they wound up their business in India and went back to the US, and I didn't have any interest in traveling. So I went and joined ANZ, which was called Index Computing in those days. The first thing that happened was, of course, ANZ, gave me a very good salary to start with. But the first thing was I had spoken to them in the interview about my skills in COBOL as well as my skills of RPG, so the two platforms that I had worked on. And I was hoping that they would give me an AS400 project. What they told me was, you know what, we have all the systems here and we don't, tie you to one system. You obviously will have job rotations every few years, so you can explore. And the minute I started working, I realized it put me onto a COBOL project and I was devastated. And I was still continuing interviews after that. The only reason that I didn't join any other companies was nobody was able to match the salary that ANZ was paying, and hence I continued. And see, I stayed there for 16 years. Some of these are reflections, about how things pan out for you. But definitely a lot of learning. See, as I said, coming from a very conservative family background, in fact, I didn't even know how to talk and communicate. So we are having this conversation today, but so many people who see some of my interviews, kind of see the work that I'm doing now, they come back and ask me, you were never like this in school and college. So it was, I was a very meek, timid girl, never spoke to anybody, walked into the office, had my piece of code that I had to do, deliver it and go home. Had no friends, had lunch all alone, chai all alone, 9 to 6, and that's about it. Because my focus was still family, I told you that my parents only wanted me to get me married. I got married, but I had a job, and so I said, okay, the job is second priority, let me just finish that and go home. That is how I was. So one of the biggest transformational moments for me in ANZ was when in one of these projects, my team lead was sent abroad for 6 months, and they needed a stand-in team lead. And again, I'm talking about an era where leadership was not qualified the way we talk about leadership today. In those days, it was the person who's most technically qualified automatically becomes the team lead. And in that team of 10 or 11 people, I was the most technically qualified. So they just made me the team lead. Now you can imagine somebody who doesn't talk, being a team lead. And also at that point in time, we were going through, that project was going through we were moving the entire delivery accountability from Melbourne to Bangalore, which meant a lot of stakeholder engagement. The team itself was going through a lot of, not a very stable phase because of what was happening in terms of the movement of all the accountability to Bangalore. You can imagine the people in Australia weren't very happy to give it. So every day there was stinkers saying that, hey, Bangalore is not performing and the team was not feeling too great about this. So there was a lot of team dynamics to be handled, stakeholder engagement to be managed, and ANZ was also going through a CMMI certification. So there was enough that was happening, and it was all going to this girl who didn't talk. And, she to kind of manage this whole thing.
How did you find your voice in the midst of all this chaos, Neeraja?
Right, exactly. So I realized one of the qualities that I have is, I will do whatever is given to me or whatever I pick up with absolute passion. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to say that if you do this, this is the bonus you get, this is the salary you get. Whatever is given to me, whether small or big, I'm passionate about it and I will deliver it, with all that sincerity. So I realized that there's a lot that needs to be done and I have to kind of change myself to get stuff done. As an example, so we were going through the CMI certification, and as part of that, every team had to do a self-assessment of where we are as against whatever standard processes were being laid out. And this self-assessment report was tabled to the MD, and he would review it to see which team is doing well and which is not. So I did the first self-assessment, and I got a pathetic score for myself and my team. And with that, I walked into this meeting, which was chaired by the MD. And I think probably mine was the least. Everybody else had great scores. And I was wondering, how is it that people are able to, kind of comply to these processes that have been defined? Because I was struggling and our team was struggling. So we were doing a production support role. And I asked another production support team, in terms of what his score was. And how he managed to comply to those processes. And like as an example, there was a question which said, do you have coding standards? And the answers had to be yes or no. Now we don't have coding standards because in a production support team, we were not coding. But then you can't say yes, because you don't have, and no is the only answer because there was no not applicable. So I was very, very, sincere in my answers, and my score was very less. So I asked this peer, how did he answer that question? And he said, see, I don't have coding standards, but because the question asked is whether you have coding standards, I just created a document and put it in the drive, and I've said yes. So, that's the kind of, and I said, I'm not going to do any of that. I will not do anything just for compliance. And in that meeting, I opened my mouth in front of the MD and I said, it will be nice if some of the people from the quality team could come and sit with my team members for one day and see the work that we do and advise us how to follow these processes because we're struggling a little. Everybody looked at me and they thought I'm going to be thrown out, if not out of the company, definitely out of this position, because you don't ask and say such things to somebody so senior in the organization, especially when everybody else is fine and they're happy and they don't have issues. The next day, the MD announced, he said it's a concept of quality representatives, which is members from the QA team who will go and sit with every team to understand the work that's being done and advise how to follow these processes. And of course, we also got our chance of having the QR come in. And then there was the realization that the processes that were defined at that point in time only catered to development projects and there was nothing for production support projects. And then they had to revamp the entire process bank that was called. So this is what gave me the, confidence that one can talk and one needs to talk. I mean, what's the worst that can happen? You would have said, shut up. But in this case, he really heard me out. And not only did it help me, but it helped the rest of the teams. So this is how, Neeraja changed and transformed from a quiet girl to, now I think there's no stopping me in terms of talking.
Absolutely. This is really a great example for anyone to see how they can find their voice. The situation, I think, and you lend themselves beautifully to this, create such an innovative way to find a solution to something that was actually a gap, if you look at it, right? In some sense.
True.
Yeah. So you said you were in ANZ for 16 years. I'm sure you played several roles over there. How was it to transition from one role to another? And, what is some advice that you can give people or as they undergo some of these transitions as part of their careers?
Sure. So one of the things that helped me was that ANZ is an organization, given it is a captive, they themselves allowed people to move in between teams and different roles, at a particular frequency. So they themselves triggered it and they pushed you to do it. The other thing in me was that I couldn't stay in a role the minute I got very comfortable in it. So every role of mine was to kind of clean up something, So I would be put into, like if this current example that I gave you, it was about setting up, this processes and ensuring that we take accountability and we have a good delivery, etc. The minute that is done, and I just feel that okay, now I can breathe. I feel like going somewhere else, and to set up something else. So that is the bug which kept me moving between different teams and different roles, and hence I have done a variety of roles. So there have been some which are a leadership where I have large teams and we have to deliver. There could also have been some which are like individual contributor roles. Like an example is that I was managing two teams and due to an organization change, one of the teams went into a different business unit. So my team shrunk, right? So if I had 20 people, because one of the teams went to a different BU, now I had only 10 people. And what also happened was they decided to move me into that other BU with the other team. And I wasn't really happy about it, I said, why did you take a decision like that? I probably should have been given the choice, which team would I like to be with based on, what kind of growth I see for myself. And I reflected and I thought that maybe that is because they didn't necessarily see such a strong dependency on me towards team A. And hence they moved me to team B. So it made me reflect, what is it that Neeraja brings to the table because of which somebody will cling on to a Neeraja? And that's what I need to hone in myself, right? So is it technology? Is it domain? Or is it, process? And with that reflection, I decided that I think I would like to kind of be the process person here. And I moved to the QA team for 6 months, so that, when you are part of the QA team, you understand the whole gamut of things. And then you get back into, again, a delivery role, so you can actually implement all those learnings. And that's the strength that you bring, and hence Neeraja will be required, and, they will not just push you away. So these are some of the reflections that I have done, and I have kept moving roles. And one of my biggest successes after this one, where I actually transformed myself from an individual contributor to the team lead, and found my voice, was a portfolio that I handled, which was for the Asia Pacific retail, banking segment of ANZ. I was there for 3 years. When I joined that team, the team size was about 38 odd people, and we had one number, with which you could talk about that team. One was the attrition, and the second was the staff engagement score. So staff engagement is a survey that runs every year to find out how happy your team is. And the attrition and the staff engagement score were 38%. Not a number that one would like to, really be proud about. And it was a challenge, and it was something that was thrown on me to say that you have to, of course, curtail the attrition and, bring up the team morale from the 38%. It took me 3 years, but the attrition absolutely plummeted, and the team size grew. It doubled to 70 plus. And when I left the team, which was again because I felt that everything was now stabilized. The staff engagement score was 65%, which was one of the highest in the company. And I said, okay, now let me move on and do something else. So this is how my learning and a lot of breadth of knowledge which I got from the different kinds of roles that I have done has helped me in my career with my next company, which was Cap Gemini, and also in my current role.
That must have been some experience, Neeraja. I'm sure some of our listeners are project managers of some sort. And can you share with our listeners, with those kind of listeners, what is it that you did to help stem attrition? Because that's a hard one.
So the first thing I did, the first 1 month that I did, and let me give you a little bit of background in this team. So this team had people who continued to be in the same team for many, many years. So they become the SMEs, right? So they grow in the same field, and they become the SMEs of that application. And the previous management always felt that you only need SMEs. Of course, you need SMEs, but you only need SMEs, and you will not bring in any external talent. You will continue to keep only this pool, and this is what defines the success of this team. So that was the kind of a situation that was there. And so the first 1 month, I only did interviews, if I may call, with all the 30 odd people that were there in the team. I spoke to everyone, spent 1, 2, 3 hours, and I heard all the complaints. The team was feeling that they were isolated. They didn't feel one with the organization. They felt that the management never spoke to them and never cared for them, and they had complaints about how the performance reviews were done for their team, what promotions happened in their team, etc., etc. They felt that they were not taken care of. So I heard all of this. And of course, there was also an internal grudge that they don't see themselves growing. And how can you grow, right? Everybody is an SME, and you will have a pyramid, in a hierarchy structure. And you can have only one person at the top leadership level. And here you have 6, 7 people who have the same levels of experience and expertise, and all 7 cannot become leaders. So then, the obvious thing is that a few have to move out and find leadership roles in another team. But that was not allowed. So I could sense all of this. I just gathered data. I did nothing in the first 1 month, but just gathered data, wrote down all the points, and then went back to various support functions. I went back to HR. I said, I need to see all the promotion records for the last 2-3 years. I want to see the performance reviews of this team for the last 2-3 years. And every clip that they had, I looked at the data. And I realized that there was nothing wrong. And this team was not really, nothing was done very differently to this team. It was probably just they felt because of the policy of whoever that you cannot move out of this team. All of you are experts, you're all performing at the same level, and of course we all go through a bell curve. So one will be a rating 3, one will be a rating 2, but the problem is that you are not really moving people out and you're not infusing fresh talent, and hence everyone's feeling stifled. So the second month I conducted a town hall and I presented the data. And that's when they realized that it is not that the managers gave them a bad scoring or there were no promotions, etc. But the issue is somewhere else. And now there is somebody who's open to even hearing about people wanting to move out of the team. Now the next challenge was, how do you just move people out? Now everybody wants to move out of the team because they realize that that's the only way to grow. And I can't move everyone out of the team because this SME knowledge is also needed. So you have to do it in phases. So then the conversations about what kind of knowledge transition we will do, who we will bring in, how do you move out, and all of that. So I think that definitely improve the staff engagement, because they realize that there is someone who is telling them what is wrong and how it can be probably corrected, and helping them in that correction. Of course, it was going to take time. They understood that. The second thing that I did was, against each of these issues, be it growth, be it whatever, I assigned these to people in the team. I said, I'm not going to drive any of this. If you think that this is the issue, then you will find a solution to it. I am there to support. If you need me to talk to whoever in the management, I'm happy to do that. But you will tell me what the solution should be. So when I started assigning these as smaller initiatives to, some of the team members, they felt the ownership. And they also realized that, okay, a lot of this, whatever is, a bias or a myth in their heads, is not the reality. And they kind of help themselves, get out of whatever mess the entire team was in. And so the end game was a 65% engagement, and definitely the attrition reduced, because as I started moving a few people out of the team, I could promote some of the juniors into those roles. And I said the team also expanded, because I started trying to get more work for them, and hence their roles expanded, because of which they kind of felt more happy about doing different kinds of things. One of the things that I have done throughout my career is that I have never gone and hired leaders per se, or team leads or whatever. I will always try to groom and grow talent from within. And I know it's a hard one. There is always this difficulty. These are all first-time team leads, but I know that I was also a first-time team lead, the girl who never spoke, but could really transform and do a lot of things. So I always work with the people and get them to grow, and that's the only way. I have had my teams and team leads and my hierarchy structures. So I think that's been one of the successes for me.
It's really heartening to hear that. I think in some sense you also help these people see their own transitions from where they were to possibly where they could go. Definitely that must have helped them progress in their careers. So as a coach and a mentor and someone who's so passionately groomed people, what have been some of your takeaways for yourself, or perhaps for other coaches also, when they are trying to do something like this?
Sure. There's always, a learning from any kind of an intervention that one does, an interaction that one does, always being a learning. So I'll come probably to, the current role that I have, which is not necessarily a technology role, but the learning for me from the kind of work that I did in my IT days. So as I said, I was driving the D&I initiatives in Cap Gemini, where I worked last. And that's when I got associated with JobsForHer. I have never taken a break in my career, right? 25 years nonstop. when Capgemini asked me to put down a recommendation to hire women on a career break, I was like, what's so special about it? You hire. So you just find women on a career break and hire. But anyway, since they asked me to put a recommendation, I did some research, and that's when I realized that there are portals like JobsForHer who are only focused on hiring women on a career break. And I just put in a recommendation and I forgot about it. But because of this, I was actually, I had registered myself on a couple of these portals because of the research that I did. And I got invited to one of, their summits. And I went there and I started hearing the women on the career break talk about their experiences of going to interviews when they wanted to restart, is when I realized what a problem we have in our country in terms of women on a career break and restarting. And I said I have to do something about it, and that's how I associated myself with JobsForHer in various capacities to see how I can really help women. Now, how that helped? So I was actually mentoring women. When you mentor, you hear them talk about their problems, their issues, could be personal, could be professional, and I kind of give them tips and tricks from my experiences in terms of how to handle something. All of this was a learning for me because in 2017, before I quit Capgemini, I went through a lot of personal crisis, because of which I finally decided to quit. So it started with my mother undergoing a surgery, and then father-in-law falling ill, husband falling in, and heaps of things that went wrong. I did take a few months off, and I went back to the company and I said that I'm not going to take on any assignment which has a lot of travel, and we tried to find a role which with no travel, but that was not coming. So the decision to quit a 25-year IT career, which was at its peak, was not very difficult because I had gone through these talks with all the other women. They all had taken these decisions much early on in their career because of either, the child, and there was no one to look after the child, or the spouse was, transferred, and so they had to kind of move cities. So all of this was a learning for me to say that, hey, you were able to sustain for 25 years, and now it's time probably for you to, kind of, take a break, think through, and then restart. So I think mentorship and coaching is, always a learning for the mentor and the coach also. And that's why the decision was very easy. And I took the break and I decided to freelance. And then the job opportunity with JobsForHer came by. I think this is probably the best phase of my life where, my passion is what is paying me as my job also. So it's great.
It's amazing to hear that your mentoring and your coaching actually helped you with the decision when the time came. Very nice. This has been a very, very interesting conversation, and I'm certainly looking forward to many, many more conversations like this. So is there something that you would like to leave our listeners with as we come to a close of this particular episode?
Sure. And I'll probably, tune this towards women because that's something, that I am extremely passionate about. And I feel that, there is some tips that we always need to give to the women who are looking to, get back to their careers or start their careers or grow in their careers. I've already spoken about ask. In the beginning itself, though nobody told me that, these are all the ways, one kind of, grows in their careers. I think I just did it and it happened. But asking is very, 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 very important. Women don't do that for anything, asking for a raise, asking for a promotion, asking for a change of job, or simply asking for maybe some flexibility if that is what is required at that point in time to make, your career work. But please do ask. Don't think about what the outcome is going to be. Let it be whatever be the outcome, but at least you should ask. The second thing that I really want to tell women is network, right? We all sit in our cocoons, and I also, am guilty of that. For the first 23 years of my life, I only did that, work and home and work. Nothing beyond that. This one summit that I attended, as I said, because I just signed up to that portal, was the first such opportunity of going and attending something which was outside of work, which was outside of, whatever I would do personally. And that is what changed my mindset, my thinking, everything. So please do. And how do you network? You attend events, you find people, and that's how networking happens. And keep those networks alive, keep those connections alive, because that is absolutely important for career growth. And the third thing I would definitely tell, especially women who are taking a break or on a break and wanting to restart, is about being in touch with whatever field you've been working in. What we usually do is when we go on a career break, we decide, okay, fine, I'm going to look after the baby for 2 years and then come back. But come back will happen, but you don't know how much the industry has changed, if it's technology, it's whatever has changed in those 2 years. And I think today things change overnight. So even if you are on a career break, do not let go of the subject, the domain that you have been working on. It is absolutely important for you to do some reading up on a daily basis so that you're clued in, because then your comeback is that much more easier. So that's what I'd probably like to leave the listeners with.
Thank you, Neeraja. This has been really nice talking to you. Thanks once again for being our podcast guest.
Thank you for the opportunity. I loved this conversation.
If you like the show and would like to share your experiences with the community or know someone else who might want to do that, please get in touch with us at podcast@pm-powerconsulting.com. That is podcast@pm-powerconsulting.com.
Please rate the show on Podchaser, Stitcher, iTunes, or any other podcast client that you find us on. Please also share our episodes with your friends and others in your network. If you or anyone you know would like to be featured on our show, do write to us at this email address: podcasts@pm-powerconsulting.com.